Hey, good afternoon to you. 506 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, Jake Denton joins us. He does tech policy for the Heritage Foundation. We'll talk to him about this bill rolling through Congress right now, designed to force the Chinese Communist Party to divest from that poisonous app we call TikTok. But are there other concerns about this bill? We'll explore all of it with Jake. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. It used to be that Europe was where the crazy stuff was happening, and America wasn't quite as crazy as Europe. But apparently, these days, we've had a role reversal of some kind, because England has decided that they are blocking the use of these sterilizing puberty blockers for kids at all of the gender clinics in the country. Take a listen.
Let's just bring you a bit of breaking news, which may be of interest to some of you. It's about puberty blockers. Now, these are drugs that are used to delay the changes of puberty in transgender youngsters. In terms of how they are prescribed,
to stop your body's biology from functioning. That's what the drugs are used to do. They're also used to chemically castrate pedophiles, the same exact drugs.
Prescribed by the NHS. There has been a lot of controversy over the last few years about this. At the moment, they are only prescribed to children attending gender identity services as part of clinical research, and they are not routinely offered to children at gender identity clinics, but they are still offered. Well, the government, NHS England, has just confirmed that children will no longer be prescribed puberty blockers at gender identity clinics. This is coming from NHS England. It just broke in the last few moments.
She's having a processing error. You can tell she's for it. she's a little annoyed that they're doing this. Fox News is right up with this. England's National Health Service banned the use of puberty blockers for children seeking treatment for gender dysphoria. This is where you become convinced that you're born in the wrong body, citing limited research. Puberty blockers, or, oh goodness, gonadotropin-releasing hormone analogs, I think I got that right, is a class of drugs that suppresses sex hormones in adolescence by continually stimulating the pituitary gland. It will now only be available to children in limited ways, such as clinical trials. They say, oh, that's there you go, guinea pigs. They'll have, you can still use kids as test subjects here in England. Jolly old London town. The NHS's website said puberty blockers, again, gonadotropin-releasing hormone analogs, are not available to children and young people for gender incongruence or gender dysphoria because there's not enough evidence of safety and clinical effectiveness. In fact, it's the opposite. There's evidence of harm and lifelong catastrophe. NHS England has previously ordered the London-based gender identity clinic at the Tavistock and Portman Trust to shut its doors amid safety concerns. Yeah, well, an entire industry dedicated to chemically castrating and mutilating children shouldn't actually be an industry. You're just describing organized crime, and they should be shut down and thrown in prison, obviously. That's what a normal person would say. There are fewer and fewer of those these days. There's also a study out today that you should know about. It's from the Journal of Urology. That's right, the official journal of the American Urological Association. These are guys who know what they're talking about. And they say there's a writer today by the name of Benjamin Ryan who's summarizing this. He's a health and science reporter. He's been featured in places like the New York Times, NBC, The Guardian, The Washington Post, The Atlantic. In other words, he at least up until today, he had mainstream credentials. We'll see what happens going forward. But here's what he says about this study out of the Journal of Urology. A study finds that the attempted suicide rate among transgender women, let me pause here so we can be clear on what that means, men who have either been convinced or convinced themselves that they are actually women, that they were born in the wrong body. Study finds that the attempted suicide rate among transgender women, i.e. men, who received a vaginoplasty, let me pause on that term, that means they had their manhood lopped off and inverted, and now they have a lifelong wound that they're going to have to maintain. That's what that is. So a vaginoplasty is what they call it in medical terms. And like this this freak science that they've been mainstreaming, who received a vaginoplasty in California, the attempted suicide rate was twice as high during the period after the surgery compared with the period before the surgery. You understand? So the dudes who lopped it off were twice as likely to be suicidal. Is that the most shocking news you've heard all day? No, it's the least shocking thing you've heard all day. But I don't know why does it take so long to get an obvious study out on a subject like this? The investigators analyzed data on all 868 people who received vaginoplasty, that is the lop it off procedure, and 357 people who received a phalloplasty. These terms have to be defined. Phalloplasty is a woman who has part of her arm removed. They will remove the forearm skin from her arm, and they will shape it into a tube of skin, and they will attach it to her groin. That's what that is. And then say she's a man. It's disgusting. And it's a mutilation. It is not for health. It doesn't help people. In fact, it increases all sorts of health consequences, negative consequences. They studied 868 people who received vaginoplasty, men, and 357 women who received a phalloplasty in California from 2012 to 2018. There were an average of 2 years of data before and after surgery. So this is they've got a big sample size here. A big, unfortunate sample size. A total of 22% of the vaginoplastic group and 21% of the phalloplastic group had at least one emergency room or inpatient psych encounter during the study period. So there's emergencies associated here. A fifth of the group was brought in for either psychological or emergency room encounters, whether before or after surgery. If there was a psych encounter prior to surgery, 34% of the vaginoplasty group and 27% of the phalloplasty group, that is 34% of the men, 27% of the women, real women, had a psych encounter after surgery. Among those receiving a vaginoplasty, men, the rate of suicide attempts was twice as high after the surgery. They say it was at 3.3% compared with before at 1.5%. Now, this gets to one of the central tenets of the religion, of the cult-like religion that surrounds this entire issue. They claim that if you don't do this to your kid, they will die. How will they die? They will die due to suicide. They say, what's the phrase? Would you rather have a living daughter or a dead son? Some version of that. They will blackmail you into this. They say, do this to your kid. The medical professionals telling parents to do this to their children. And here you have a study out of the Journal of Urology saying, no, actually, it's the opposite. It's as are all things when the left gets a hold of them. Everything's an inversion of the truth. Everything. In fact, it's a useful rubric through which to filter most of these debates. You're like, whatever you're saying, the opposite of that is true. You can start with that as the assumption. It's like innocence until proven guilty. Opposite until proven true. That's my operating posture with the left. It hasn't failed me yet. So here you go, yet again. Oh, people are going to be suicidal unless you chop them up, unless you remove their forearm, you append it to their groin, or if you chop off their member and then leave them with a lifelong wound that the medical industry will tend to great profit, and castrate these people and leave them infertile, leave them sterilized. Unless you do that, they're going to kill themselves. It's the opposite, as always. It's just always the case. So that's the update on that horror show, which, again, it felt like a couple years ago, this was the kind of thing you're like, this is like such a random, small-scale, tiny percentage of the population. This is, no, I don't know anybody. It's gone off like crazy. Pushed by major American medical associations, like literally the American Medical Association or the American Academy of Pediatrics. These are once respected institutions that have been captured by left-wing radicals and have used that power to destroy the lives of the powerless instead of ensuring what they should, which is the well-being of health. And you're seeing this not just at those major medical associations. You're seeing it play out in hospitals. You're seeing it play out in medical schools. left-wing capture is entirely destructive. I was having a conversation with some people last night about the role that the medical schools are playing. The medical schools are all in on, first of all, this garbage, but also what we sort of euphemistically refer to as DEI. The left refers to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is all a euphemism for racial prejudice and religious prejudice, basically various forms of prejudice. But they dress it up under this idea that, again, once again, it's the opposite of what is true. They say it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, when, of course, it's there's better words: division, exclusion, and injustice. I don't know. Pick whatever you want for it. But it's prejudice. It's institutionalized prejudice. That's why sometimes when people on the right say, well, there's no institutionalized racism, what are you talking about? No. There is institutionalized racism. The left is imposing it everywhere they get their grubby little hands into our institutions, and that is definitely at the university level. At the undergraduate level, it's been there for decades now. And now we're seeing the fruits of that. This is why these Marxist ideologies have taken over so many of our institutions. And the same is true at the major medical schools, where you have medical schools who are prioritizing bringing in people on the basis of irrelevant things. What color is their skin? Well, what does that have to do with anything? Are they going to be a good doctor or not? Will they have a steady hand when they perform surgery? Will they be able to accurately read a medical chart? Will they be able to assess my well-being and diagnose what ails me? Those are the only important questions. In fact, I don't know about you, but in our area we have, if you're just being very shallow about the word diversity, we have a very diverse medical corps here in the DC area in particular. If you've ever had to go not only from your primary care physician, but you have to go see specialists, I've had to go see other people, get a referral to go see somebody else. I have no idea what the color of their skin is. All I care about is their competence, whether or not they're going to successfully diagnose what ails me and then offer me the best course going forward in order for me to resolve that issue. So I have doctors of every skin color and every gender, and I have never once paused to be like, well, I wish that guy was a different color. No, it's insanity. I just want him to, give me enough time to talk to him. Some of these doctors, they bill a lot. They move quick. They get out of the room so fast. I have to write down my questions. Like 1 second, I've got these 8 questions I wrote down to prepare for you. I want them to listen to me, to work with me, to help me, and to resolve my problems, not have me take too many risks. Don't overprescribe some sort of opioid or something to me, to be considerate of all of the things that go into health holistically. That's what you want. And the same is true of pilots, for instance. Have you noticed the left is trying to take all the high stakes jobs and then ruin the standards by which you get into them? Instead of demanding the highest quality professionals to be the surgeons, to be the pilots, to be the guys with real control over the well-being of human beings, they're like, well, let's start judging people by irrelevant standards for those jobs. What? Why would you care what color your pilot's skin color is? Why would you even begin to care? 95% of the time, I have no idea what color my pilot is. I don't even know if the pilot's a man or a woman because I'm not staring at the cockpit. I'm staring at my ticket, trying to figure out where my damn seat is as I get on the plane. But you get on with some past comfort that these commercial pilots seem to know what they're doing. They seem to, right? They get you from point A to point B. Do you hit turbulence? Sure. Sure, that definitely happens. Out of their control. You want to make sure you take off and land successfully. But the left has decided, no, we're going to take good things. We're going to take high stakes jobs. We're going to take important jobs. We're going to take jobs that where people's lives are on the line. We're going to take education, and we're going to meddle with all of it. We're going to change the standards. I look at a place like Thomas Jefferson High School of Science and Technology right there in Fairfax County. For years, #1 school in the country. It's not anymore. I think U.S. News and World Report has now dropped it to number 5, I think. It's on the slide. And the reason for that is because the idiots at the Fairfax County School Board, controlled by left-wing Marxist ideologues, decided that the most important thing for admission is not academic excellence, it's skin color. And so they've begun meddling with the composition of the school, and guess what ends up happening? It's the same result. It's equity. That's what equity is. It drags down excellence. It's designed to destroy, not to uplift. And so We're seeing it all over the place, and I'm encouraged when you see people fighting back. It's sad, England is banned puberty blockers, like I said at the top of the segment. Why does England have to go before America? We were the ones who were revolutionary when it came to England. Now they're the ones who are leading the revolution. All right, let's go to line 4. Mike calling in from Sunshine now. Line 4. Mike, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, thanks for taking my call. I told your call screener that back in the 90s, my spouse graduated from medical school at Georgetown University. And even back then, they had what was called the STARS program. And, I view it as almost equal opportunity to some degree, but let me tell you what happened. They would spend 2 years as opposed to 1 year. And this would be Black and Hispanic kids who had decent MCATs, probably decent GPAs, pre-med undergrad. And they took a couple of years to get into the program. But they struggled, once they went mainstream. And the way medicine is going right now, nurse practitioners are going to be, who do not have the experience of doctors, are treating a lot of people. And I just want to give you that little bit of history.
Yeah, it's a complicated field too, because there's a shortage of doctors at the same time, as you're pointing out. And so you want to get more in, but you need them to be competent. It just can't just be like a reckless industry. And on MCATs, one of the things that's become obvious is that these top medical schools are lowering the MCAT standards for people on the basis of their skin color, whereas there are some skin colors where you have to have a higher MCAT score to get in. That's senseless. That's like the craziest thing ever, and it's one of the most important jobs you could possibly have somebody on the basis of merit.
Yep. And the other comment I made was about gender-affirming care, Vince. The doctors, health systems, and the accrediting bodies that believe in a gender-affirming care have to be sued into oblivion by detransitioners, but then they're going to burden shift to malpractice insurance.
Yeah.
Who's going to burden shift to government? And we got to nip that in the bud.
Yeah. Sometimes I think about this. I'm like, I wonder if there's big malpractice law firms who are funding the endowments at these universities to churn out terrible doctors just so they could turn around and take their money. Maybe the scheme is that big. Coming up, we've got Jake Denton joining us from the Heritage Foundation. A debate is breaking out on Capitol Hill among conservatives about how best to handle the poison that is TikTok. We'll explore it next with Jake. Hey, good afternoon to you. 535, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Congress is currently considering a piece of legislation called the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act, brought about to go after the Chinese Communist Party-controlled TikTok, which is running an entirely destructive psychological operation on especially young people in the United States of America. And it's also a huge surveillance platform for the CCP. How do we deal with this? And is this legislation the right way to do that? Jake Denton joins us now. He's a research associate in the Tech Policy Center at the Heritage Foundation, and he's on the phone. Hello, Jake. Good to talk to you today, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Let's. I guess we should start with the basics here. TikTok, why is it a threat? Why should we be concerned?
Yeah, well, it's been operating for about 4 years now in its current capacity, and it's been sending troves of Americans' consumer data back to China, to its parent company ByteDance, which, due to national security laws in China, are accessible to the Chinese Communist Party. And so that means that your personal data, everything from your keystrokes, your voice prints from microphone access, your biometric data, can all be accessed and used for literally whatever the Chinese Communist Party would like. So a massive national security threat.
Right. And then on the other side, not just the surveillance, the psychological warfare, basically the psyops that they've been running on the United States, it seems pretty crystal clear the effect they've had, especially on young people in the United States.
Absolutely. Well, they leverage that data, the troves of data, to deploy all sorts of these types of messages. And, there was an ODNI report just yesterday that, a lot of these members of Congress received a classified briefing on that essentially said they used this types of information to meddle in the 2022 election. So they're able to deploy these very tailored messages. We saw just the other day, and even again today, that they sent notifications to call their Congress people, to the members of the application.
Right.
And that is all done through geolocation data, right? So they know the exact congressional district that you're in, and it gives you a direct link to call. Well, that's just one element of how they do this. They can also do it through media on your social media feed, these tailored messages propagandizing you. So it's a huge threat, and they've already shown a political will to weigh in these things.
A number of children were calling Capitol Hill last week, according to a variety of congressional offices, threatening to either hurt the congressman or were threatening to commit suicide if TikTok were to be, quote, banned. Now, of course, TikTok, the company, of course, controlled by CCP, has been misleading the public on what's actually being debated here. It's not an outright ban. It is a forced divestiture to get this platform away from the Communist Party's control, correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And, what's really interesting here is that if you look at their communications coming out of, their public policy account and these press statements, they don't even really attack these claims of the data risk. They call it a First Amendment violation, and they say that this is a Trojan horse to, ban all sorts of social media sites. And so they've almost conceded the data risk point and are now trying to claim that their, CCP-led surveillance operation has a First Amendment protection, which obviously everyone knows is not the case. So
Yes.
This is a losing argument coming from them for sure.
Okay. But there are American citizens who are concerned about this bill, this legislation. Among them is Congressman Thomas Massie. Now, I have noted that Massie is also the recipient of donations from a major American stakeholder in TikTok. So in that sense, he does have a conflict of interest when he talks about this. But he's not alone. He has alleged that this could be a Trojan horse for threats to liberty. And I think a lot of conservatives are on guard for anything that resembles the sins of the Patriot Act, where you pass a piece of legislation designed to target adversaries, enemies of the United States, and not trample on the rights of American citizens. What gives you confidence, if you have it right now, that this piece of legislation is the right way to go?
Yeah, well, the good news is that this bill is very narrow in scope. A lot of people don't actually read through the bill. I know Congressman Massey certainly did. I think it might just be a little bit of a misunderstanding of the contents, but this is really focused on foreign adversary-owned foreign applications, as the name suggests, that pose a national security threat. So even if you're a Chinese-owned application, you don't immediately qualify for restrictions. You also have to pose a national security threat. And so there's this long trail of criteria in order to meet the standard for action. And so it's very narrow in scope. There is only probably a handful of companies that could meet this definition. TikTok is one of them, but it could never attack a U.S. company. And even if passed, it would require an act of Congress to amend the legislation to then go through and go after another company. So this is like a huge undertaking, and there is no pathway to that scenario. But
we have something called the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and it's supposed to target foreigners by its very definition, and it's been used to target American citizens. So again, I'm dwelling on this because I'm genuinely open-minded about it, but I am concerned about threats to American liberty. So in other words, when you say that this bill could be used and it's very narrowly tailored, there's a lot of hoops to jump through to say, hey, you're a threat and you need to be forced out of your investment, that is the Chinese Communist Party. At whose discretion would that be? Is that the President of the United States who gets to make that call?
Yeah, so it is the president's call, but I think, the good news here is that the bill does not have any scope on the individual, right? Like you could never fall under the covered platform, or you never fall under the coverage of this bill. It is only targeted towards corporations. And, even in this bill, the application, as we know at TikTok, could be transferred to an American company in its current state and live on. And so it's very obvious here that this is just a misrepresentation of the bill. There is no possibility for it to hurt Americans in the way that the Patriot Act did. There is no surveillance provision, nothing data transfer-wise to the U.S. government. It's all above the board. And, if it weren't, the Heritage Foundation would not be in support of it.
I mean, this is definitely one of the reasons why I'm inclined to think this might be a good piece of legislation. I think Heritage takes it's a big step for Heritage to say they're behind it. But again, on the legislation itself, one thing that puzzles me is why not just focus on China? Why not? So it's got 4 different countries in here. It's got Russia, it's got North Korea, Iran, and China, and I agree. They're all adversaries to the United States, but we're talking about a specific, unique threat right now, TikTok. Why not narrowly tailor this all the way down to just something the CCP controls?
Well, this was actually in reference to an existing piece of legislation. This is an established definition of foreign adversary. And so they aren't really even crafting new language. They're leveraging existing legislation that is passed. And so this was an effort to essentially not muddy the water with new debates, not targeting just Chinese companies. This is a provision that has been used across the board in other contexts to target foreign influence in our companies and our economy. And so this is really just an above-the-board move. There is no clever trick going on here. This is the logical play.
And this interview is not going to come back to haunt you in 5 years, is it?
I don't think so. I think this ends well for the American people, regardless of divestment or ban.
I hope so. I mean, like I said, if there's any social media company that deserves to be launched into the sun, it's TikTok. I mean, this is like the craziest thing ever. But when you have Russia in there as one of the adversary countries, that leads to the current political debate. And I know Heritage is, of course, familiar with this because you've been on the receiving end of it. But if you express any skepticism at all about what's happening in Ukraine right now, like how's our money being spent? What's happening to our weapons? What kind of accountability is there? Is there corruption going on? The left, led by Joe Biden, will accuse you of being a stooge of Vladimir Putin. And that's the thing that makes me go, well, wait a second. Could Joe Biden use that as a rationale to ban, say, Twitter, now known as X, because it allows those types of sentiments to be expressed?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable reaction, but the reality is from the legislation that it has to be Russian-owned, right? Like this is an ownership question. The governance of the platform has to be in control of one of these foreign adversaries. And so X is obviously owned by Elon Musk. There is no Russian ownership of the platform, and therefore it could never fall under the scope of this bill. And there isn't even a pathway to amend the bill in the future, really, to include X. And so X is safe, Facebook is safe, Instagram is safe. There is no pathway for an American platform to ever fall under the restrictions of this bill.
Well, if that's the case, then I'm all for it. If that's the case, I'm right there with you. Jake Denton, thank you very much for giving us your perspective from the Heritage Foundation on this today. A big debate, and as far as I know, they're set to take this thing up tomorrow in the House. Correct?
That is correct, yes, and I expect it to pass in a resounding fashion.
And will it make its way through the Senate? I've heard that's a bit of a coin toss right now.
It'll obviously be sent to the Senate after passing the House, and then it's kind of up to Chuck Schumer. So we just kind of have to wait and see. But I think he'll do the right thing and call it to a vote. And it's clear the American people and the House of Representatives are going to send this with a clear message that they want it passed.
Yeah, Biden says he's going to sign it. Although his campaign's on TikTok, so what does that tell you? I mean, the whole thing is so crazy. Hey, Jake Denton, thank you very much.
Absolutely, thanks for having
me. Wait, there's audio today of Karine, right? Do I have that in my cut sheet, or is that? I'm being told now. Oh, okay. Here, I'm navigating to the correct position where this can be found. Here's Karine today. She was asked about this incongruence between Joe Biden's willingness to sign what would be, a forced divestiture of TikTok out of the control of the Chinese communists, with the fact that he's currently using the platform and allowing the Chinese communists to run psyops on the American people. He's given that an implicit endorsement with his campaign.
And the president has said that he would sign into law the bill that could have TikTok banned. If the president is so concerned about the national security risks around TikTok, why is he posting on the platform?
So I'll say this. Jake Sullivan, our national security advisor.
I'll say this. The I'll say this is the weakest effort for her to buy time. I'll say this.
Jake Sullivan, our national security advisor, just spoke to the more broadly why this bill is important, why we welcome this bill.
The guy's pretty untrustworthy too, that Jake Sullivan. So it doesn't, this is, I'm telling you, I hate equivocating. I hate being in a position where I don't have the clearest possible view, but I'm just being honest with you. I know what the correct outcome is here. TikTok, it's got to go. It's got to go. But don't you dare screw me in this. Like, don't you dare come on. And how many times do we have to be stung by Washington? They deserve all of the skepticism in the world. Like, really? You're on my side? Have you proved that?
It's going to the process, and we're offering technical support, so I'll just leave that piece there. As it relates to the campaign, I would have to, and their strategy as it relates to TikTok, I'm just going to leave it to them.
You'd have to ask the campaign. Why did she say so many words that don't mean anything? Here's a follow-up.
So there are a lot of people and businesses that rely on TikTok for their financial livelihood. What is the White House's message to those folks if TikTok were to be banned, which is a possibility?
Our national security advisor laid out in a very, very clear terms why this bill is important about ownership, if it's about ownership here in this country or elsewhere, in particular China, right? He spoke about that. Where do we want that ownership? Where do we want that data of Americans to be? Here or in China? Like, that is basically what the National Security Advisor laid out. And so that is the underlying, the importance of that bill. It's a bipartisan bill. It is something that we welcome. We're obviously, again, going to offer technical support.
Whatever. And on this national security threat front, remember, Donald Trump, as president of the United States, called it a national security threat. He tried to ban TikTok through executive order. The courts got in the way. TikTok sued. And they sided, the courts, everybody sided with the Chinese Communist Party and kept TikTok in the United States. Now there's a lot of money. Here's the other thing that corrupts this debate. There's just a lot of money involved. People are throwing around cash like crazy right now for people to take positions, to defend it, to go against. It's bananas. So we'll keep sorting through it. And again, they've got this coming before Congress tomorrow. Let me take Lawrence in Alexandria right now, line 2. Lawrence, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Yeah, well, thanks for taking my call. But I'm just confused a little bit about the hypocrisy of the fact that, well, they want to ban TikTok, but it certainly won't happen until after November because the Biden administration thinks it's a great vehicle in which to promote his campaign.
Yes, and if you were, say, a member of the Chinese Communist Party, Lawrence, and of course I know you're not. I can tell you're obviously a patriot.
I don't speak that language.
You don't speak that language. But if you were, and you say had control of TikTok, which presidential candidate would you be pushing right now on that platform?
That's a loaded question.
I know. That's why I asked it. I like loaded questions. Yeah, TikTok would be, of course, Biden. Biden's on the platform. They're going to push him. I mean, China has never been happier than with Joe Biden as president of the United States. They paid that man a lot of money through the years.
Well, I'm going to step aside, but I just think that's the big hypocrisy of the day.
Yeah, well, among many.
Thanks for what you do, man.
Lawrence, thanks, sir.
Yeah,
Lawrence is a patriot. Great call. All right. This is a great story. Chris Plant's a great patriot. I'm going to tell you about another great patriot. A high school has apologized for asking one of their students to remove an American flag from his truck. Did you have this happen at your high school by any chance? Did anybody when you go to high school? I went to high school in a couple different places. I wasn't on the run or anything. My dad was a Marine, so I started in Florida. Finished in at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, which was good. It was all military brats at that high school. So they were accustomed to people showing up in odd years. And I definitely saw people fly American flags on the back of their trucks, especially down in Florida. Well, authorities at a rural high school in southeastern Indiana are now apologizing after they were caught asking a student to take down his American flag from his truck last Thursday. Here's a local report from ABC WCPO 9 on the details.
A high school senior in Dearborn County is going viral. It's over an American flag on the back of his truck.
Love local news voice.
He says on Thursday the school told him to take it off. It was a violation of school rules. But after a social media post and a show of support from other students, the school is now reversing course. WCPO 9 News reporter Andrew Rowan spoke with that student and has new information from the Eastern Central High School principal.
Wherever 17-year-old Cameron Blasek goes, so does Old Glory.
The flag itself represents this country, this beautiful country that we live in.
He fastened the flag to his truck this summer.
It's very strongly secured in there. I mean, you can't pull that out if you tried.
It abides by the U.S. flag code.
I got pulled aside by my counselor and vice principal, and they told me, hey, you got to remove the flag off the back of your truck. And I kind of looked at him, and I said, no. I said, it's not going to happen. I said, I can't.
Cameron held the line.
read through East Central's 2023-2024 handbook, and the word flag wasn't even mentioned in the parking lot or driving section. The only section it's mentioned in is the flag twirling section.
Boy.
The next day at school, others showed up with flags of their own.
There was a huge support group there that believed and stood for the same thing that I did, and I was kind of shocked by that.
Yeah, it was the whole parking lot then was full of American flags, other students supporting this young man. His dad's real proud of him, which is great. He should be. He's funny. They were saying, we're requesting you remove it. He's like, I know. It's just a request. A request means you're not demanding or telling me I have to, so I'm going to decline your request. Said the kid. The school has since backed down. They've apologized for the misunderstanding. They said you can definitely fly the American flag at school. Heck, the American flag literally flies on the flagpole at the school. So the kid's well within his rights. What a great story. What a great patriot. Another great patriot coming up next year, the great one, Mark Levin on WMAL.